What's up, Fit Fam? Coach Rye here. We're going to dive in and talk about the criteria for Bikini 2023. And we're going to be doing it right here live on the screen. I'll be drawing all kinds of stuff for you and just really breaking down the physique for you. This is, the time of year where shows are about to really start kicking off. Competition's going to be happening. And I know a lot of people are always confused about the criteria and what's changing, what's not, and what you need to be bringing, okay? So this is going to be relevant for any of you out there that are competing in bikini division, whether, it's going to be your first show, it's maybe you've been competing a bit, maybe you're going to nationals, maybe you're already a pro. We're going to talk about what the judges want to see in bikini this year and how it's going to be relevant to you, okay? So with that, we have our top 2 bikini Olympians on the screen here. So we got Maureen over here, and we got, Jen Dory. She was former bikini Olympian. She got second this year. Now, what we're going to be talking about is the criteria in regards to what judges want to see, and the Olympia really sets the example for that. If you guys watch my videos, I talk about that all the time, where the Olympia, is really the judges saying, okay, this is the best, this is what we want to see. This does not mean you need to look like these women on the screen here in order to compete. So if it's your first comp or something like that, don't be intimidated by this. Just understand the criteria. This exemplifies it the easiest way, so I can really teach you that here, and this kind of trickles down as to how the judging will work all the way down to even if your first show or not. Okay, so let's talk about the criteria now. So bikini. We always talk about bikini being this hourglass shape, and that comes from a few different areas. So we'll have, this width of the upper body up here in the shoulders, the narrow look here at the waist, tiny waist, and then, the lower body widens back out, and this is kind of where we get this hourglass type look going, okay? You could do it here too. But the point is really what we see, it's this hourglass shape. Bikini's all about symmetry, shape, proportion, and some conditioning too, but realistically that hourglass shape is everything for bikini. It's very symmetrical. They want to see everything match upper to lower and have that symmetry in tap. Now what actually makes that shape is not coming from condition and all that, being a certain level of leanness. It's actually coming from muscle development, and this is one of the biggest areas bikini competitors don't focus on enough, is actually making sure they have enough muscle. A lot of people think you can just get really lean, dial in, but no, you want to make sure that you have the right amount of muscle mass and everything before you even go to stage. So let's look and see what actually makes the hourglass the hourglass. First thing is going to be those shoulders, okay? So you see I'm drawing on the screen here. This is what creates that width, really, primarily in bikini division, having good shoulder development. Now the shoulders, they're rounded and they're full. So what this means is that these athletes have to train pretty much all heads of the deltoid in order to get this, okay? So we got the front head, we got the lateral head, which really kind of projects outward, and then we'll see that rear delt in a minute when we go to the back. But realistically, you have to have very full, rounded out delts in order to get that shape and that width. If you're not training shoulders enough, you're not training properly, you're not doing the right exercises, you're just not going to get that width, okay? The goal in bikini with the shoulders is to really get that kind of upper body to be so wide, and then tapers down into the waist, which creates that dramatic kind of tapered aesthetic, and judges definitely want to see this in bikini, okay? That tapered look, very, very important. If you don't have that shoulder development, you're going to get more of a squared out, rectangular type look, if you will, versus, having the actual development there. So really, shoulders, a big key thing to focus on. Make sure you're training your shoulders right, and make sure you're doing it enough, and you're not going to stage without that shoulder development this season, okay? You got to have that. Now, I always get a lot of questions about the arms. So what about arm training, Coach Rye? Do people in bikini, the athletes in bikini, need to be training arms? And the answer to that is yes. It's going to be a small focus on the bicep and the tricep in this division. It's not a huge focus like in figure or something like that. This is a division where we want symmetry, though. So we have to have that. So you can't really have, these huge cap rounded delts, this fullness to the deltoid, but not anything going on the arms. So you do want to have a little bit of bicep and a little bit of tricep going on here. It's not as, a very specific dedicated day of the week. You're not going to be doing tons and tons of set of preacher curls and stuff like that. You're really going to be training the arms in the way that you just want to match that symmetry. You also don't want to overdevelop the arms. I've actually seen that a lot in bikini the past season, and it's because athletes are getting in their head about training upper body so much, trying to do chest. We'll talk about that in a second, everything else. But what happens is your arms actually can get too big, and then that can detract from this width you get up top, okay? So make sure if you're watching, you're taking notes, any of you coaches out there watching or athletes that are competing, you know, you do not want to train too much of the arms in bikini division. Otherwise, what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and take away from that shoulder development. And that's not something judges want to see. Makes it look less dramatic, makes it look less, you know, of that width, which is going to hurt that tapered look, okay? So the next thing I want to talk about here is, as we kind of move down the physique, let's talk a little bit more about the lats, okay? So the lats in bikini division are actually relevant really only in this front pose, and you can't really see with Maureen here, but this actually is perfect, even though her hair is covering it, to give you an example of the shape that we're talking about. So the lats in bikini primarily are what can create this kind of sweeping shape down into the waist, if you will. So we got this upper body, you know, shoulder, everything here, and then we get this sweeping effect as the lats really pull that into the waist. Now that gives you a nice tapered look overall, okay? And that's gonna look good coming from that width up top, tapering into the waist to have. So you definitely want to have, you know, some good lat development going on here. It's not, again, a super focus. You're not going to be posing your back. Your hair's going to be down. We'll look in the back pose in just a minute, and you'll see, you know, you're not seeing the back muscles, but really the lats become important in this front pose because they sweep us into the waist. So lat training that's focused on, you know, the width, not specifically trying to get this thick back development, you know, depth wise, but actually just creating width that's going to help taper us from the shoulders into the waist. Okay, so very key and critical there. If you're lacking in the lat department, again, what's going to happen is you're going to look kind of rectangular, right? It's not going to look as good, you know, sweeping this tapered effect into the waist the judges want to see. Okay, so upper body wise, this is where we're at. Now let's talk a little bit about chest, because this always comes up. I always get the question, do bikini athletes need to train chest? And they do not, ladies and gents. Okay, there's very few situations where I have bikini athletes training chest, and I know the argument always comes to, isn't there going to be a muscle imbalance then? And no, not really. If you're training your upper body correctly, you know, you're doing shoulder work right, and you're doing all these other exercises, you're going to get a lot of secondary chest work. Your chest is going to be working in many things. You know, you don't need to do isolation chest exercises to build your pecs in bikini division like you do in, you know, like open bodybuilding or, you know, figure, women's physique, stuff like that, where there's a lot more muscle. The chest, actually, if you train a lot of pecs in bikini, it can really take away from, again, this dramatic effect of the shoulder width. Because what can happen is you get more squared out. You know, you're just all of a sudden training chest in the zone to where it's not really benefiting you. In rare circumstances, I'll have bikini athletes train chest, and literally it would be just like for a front deltoid benefit at that point. If it's some area that they're definitely lacking, you know, they haven't been training the right way, or they haven't, you know, built a good foundation of muscle, I may do that, but it's not an area that I'm directly focused on when I'm coaching bikini athletes, because it's just not very beneficial to the physique. What I want to see in a bikini athlete, and what judges want to see, is this, you know, width at the top, that taper down into the waist. Not looking for pectoral muscles in this division, okay? So let's talk a little bit now about the waist. Now, the waist of bikini has to be tight, it has to be tiny, it has to be small, it's got to be narrow, all right? So that's really what's going to help us get that tapered look all the way around and build that first top piece of the hourglass. And that's really what we see. You know, the waist is largely responsible for that. So you got to have a small waist. You got to make sure that you're not getting blocky, you're not training it out. And I always get asked about bikini ab training. You know, very little ab training is actually going to be done in this division, because you can see there's some soft lines here, you know, on Jen, some soft lines on Maureen, things like that. And we'll talk more about conditioning as we go. But these are not athletes that are spending a lot of time doing heavy oblique work, you know, doing a lot of crunch work, weighted and all this. You're doing ab training to a lesser degree in this division because your goal is not to, you know, end up widening the waist, thickening the waist. Goal is to be narrow at the waist, tiny, okay? So there's a number of exercises you can do for that, vacuums. People always ask me about waist trainers. I suggest actually trying to do this, you know, by learning intra-abdominal stuff, how to get the muscle right, how to get your transverse abdominis working, and really bring everything in. Because what that does is that'll narrow you out, and that'll really help you when you diet down. A lot of the waste that we see in bikini comes way more from being at the right level of conditioning and dieting down versus actually, you know, doing ab work specifically. So do I have bikini athletes do ab work? Yeah, I do, but it's not heavy, it's not weighted, it's not hardcore. It's mainly, honestly, an active recovery day, and some I won't even do it depending on physique. So, you know, you're not going to see six-pack abs in this division. It's just not going to happen. It's not lean enough, and it's also not a focus. The goal should be to get small, narrow at the waist, because that's going to give us the best tapered look, okay? So really, don't overdo the ab training, ladies. Don't be doing too much abs. If anything, focus on just bringing the abs in, vacuum, stuff like that. There's tons of other exercises. If you guys want some examples, hit my website. I got that there for you, teamfflex.com. Now let's look lower body. So bikini, lower body, you know, it's really going to be about, again, now creating the balance from the top to the bottom. It's the hourglass. So we want to see symmetry. We want to see that fullness, that shape, that proportion going all the way up and down the athlete's physique, okay? So we got to see some development now into the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings that are matching the upper body and the shoulders. So here you'll see both these athletes have very full glutes. You're going to see that fullness happening all the way across the board. There is no lacking part of these athletes' glutes in bikini. Now, one area that there's always an issue with, especially with new coming athletes, beginners, you know, those of you trying to go to nationals probably have a lot of this issue. It's the actual upper glute. So I talk about upper glute a lot on this channel, but it's so dang important. Okay, the upper glute in bikini is very critical, because if you don't have this upper glute development, your glutes are going to look flat on stage. So you actually see sometimes athletes, you know, it looks basically like it's flat and then it rounds out at the bottom. Not going to be good for the front pose, but definitely not for the back pose, because what it'll do is it'll actually flatten your glutes out. We'll talk more about that when we get to the actual back shot, but really making sure you have fullness here. And you know, they're not over hypertrophied, they're not overdeveloped. This is not wellness, okay? If you want to have asymmetrical, you know, glute development, you want really big glutes, really big quads, really big hamstrings, wellness is the place for that. Bikini, it's about being symmetry, right? All symmetrical, symmetry up and down, totally, you know, matching. So you're going to see there's fullness here, there's shape. That's what they want to see. Judges want to see that, but it's not going to be to the degree it's super developed, over the top, anything like that. So then we look to the hamstring, and you're going to see this here too. All right, hamstrings, they're definitely training hamstrings. It's a muscle that's there for sure. Getting hit, bringing a little bit of that fullness to it. You'll see a little bit of that rounding shape, but what you won't see is, you know, over dominance here. A lot of athletes, sometimes they get in the spot where they think they have to train hamstrings so much. Well, what happens is if you overdo your hamstrings, it makes your glutes look smaller, right? I mean, imagine if your hamstring's more developed, all of a sudden the muscle that you have here, that shape, that's changed. It's been diminished, in other words. And if you got to keep symmetry, you want to make sure it's symmetrical. So hamstrings are going to be trained to lower body, but they're not a huge focus. Really what we're looking at in bikini is the glute here a lot. You know, quads too. Quads is one thing that comes up. This can be an area where, you know, some athletes way overdo this, or they have a muscle imbalance where the quads are just too developed. You do not want to be doing too much quads in bikini if you want to maintain this type of symmetry in this look. Again, it's a muscle that's trained, you're training it, but you don't want to hypertrophy it to the degree it's going to take over and take away from the glute. And I see a lot, you know, athletes that maybe they have a hard time getting good glute activation in their glute training, and they're just not following the right exercises, they're not doing warm-ups, activation drills, so on and so forth. They actually may be overtraining the quads primarily even on their glute day, right? And I know some of you ladies listening right now know what I'm talking about, where you're doing all these glute exercises, but you just keep feeling the quads overall, you know, are working way harder than the glutes are, and that's when you start getting this asymmetrical look. But fullness to the quads, showing that muscle, key here. Not crazy developed though. Remember what I said about the lower body. It's all symmetry, it's all shape. That's how we get the hourglass, and that's really what you see when you look at this. People always ask me about calves, so I'm going to go ahead and just highlight this. I really don't talk about these in many videos. The calves are not a focus in bikini division, okay? So if you're out there worried about training your calves, you do not need to do it. If you're training your lower body correctly with the right exercises, your calves are going to get plenty of secondary work as it is, not to mention all the cardio and stuff that you probably have to do on prep, whatever. You're going to get plenty of calf work. I would not focus on this as an isolation exercise. I know some women like to do that, but again, what's going to happen if you build the calves too much, now we're taking away from everything above it, and you know, we're throwing off that symmetry and that balance. So I do not suggest direct calf training for most bikini athletes. It'd be a very rare situation where it is. Normally, if I've even done that in a program, it's because somebody specifically requested it, and I did it in a way that I didn't think it was going to put us out of balance. So that's really it when we're looking at this. Let's talk about just conditioning before we go to the back pose. Conditioning notes in bikini. It's the softest level of conditioning in the women's divisions. And people online, I've seen it all the time, people commenting saying, this is not soft, this is shredded, this is lean. Yes, it is lean, but it is softest compared to when we're talking about figure, when we're talking about women's physique, women's bodybuilding, all much more muscular, all much more leaner divisions than bikini. Bikini and wellness are on par with their conditioning, and what it is this soft lines, okay? So you'll see some soft lines in the physiques of these athletes. You'll see it right here in this glute. You'll see a little bit in the quad here, 1 or 2 lines there. You'll see some lines in the obliques and into the abs maybe. You'll see a little bit here in the shoulders. You'll see some soft lines throughout the physique. But what you won't see is deep cuts, striations, graininess of the muscle, anything that's going to come with being leaner. So keep that in perspective. I know athletes are always so worried about being so lean, right? But what happens is you can honestly come in too lean, or even worse, burn off muscle trying to get lean. And what's going to happen if you burn off the muscle is all the shape that we just talked about. You're not going to look like an hourglass. You're going to look like a rectangle, okay? You're going to lose the glute fullness, lose the shoulder fullness, lose all of this. And that's not going to be the best fit for you, okay? It's gonna score you down on stage for sure. Muscle is top priority in bikini. Shreds, all this stuff that everybody's always worried about, that comes second to having the muscle. If you don't have the muscle, don't even try to get shredded. Just go build the dang muscle. All right, let's go look at the back post now, because this is, they say in bodybuilding, bodybuilding's one from the back. That's true in a lot of divisions. It's said about pretty much everything. You can say that for bikini too. This is really where we get to see what makes bikini, for the most part, its own division. Where, it's not like wellness, where the wellness lower body is very developed, very built. This is, again, a very symmetrical, up and down, hourglass type shape. So you see that here. We'll see the same things we talked about in the front. We're going to see it in the back, and we'll do a quick review up top, and then we'll talk about the lower body, because that's really the key to this back pose. So, shoulders, again, we just talked about those in the front, being full, being rounded. Got to have this. This is that lateral delt really taking over back here. We'll see this on both of our top 2 athletes, that fullness, that roundness, that development. You'll even see just a little bit, too, into that rear delt. So, again, a key piece to make sure you're training all heads of the deltoid and getting that fullness, getting that roundness. And this is, again, where we get to see the arms, not a huge focus. You can see how small the triceps look in this angle, how small the arms look overall compared to the delt. Do not be overtraining the arms, ladies, and all you bro coaches out there giving these bikini girls, 20 sets of bicep curl. It's not the right answer, okay? And then, we talk about the lats. I said the lats are a minute, if you will, focus here. And that's because, the hair covers them generally. You're not going to see that. But from the shape perspective, it is important. So that width that we talked about, good to go. Make sure you're getting that lat width. Training your lats for sure. Going to be good. Narrow at the waist. You'll see it here too. Boom, boom. Same thing. So that's what creates our upper piece of that hourglass. That's the full dealio. That's what we want to see. So really good for bikini division to have that. Now let's look lower body at the glutes, the hamstrings. And a little bit of the quad. We'll talk about the quad here, even though you can't really see it. So remember when I said the upper glute becomes super important in this division? This is why, okay? This is a straight on shot where we're getting this camera shot. But you can see how full and rounded the upper glute here is from this angle. However, judges at every show you're going to compete at are sitting below you, okay? They're sitting down here, and they're looking up at you the entire time. They're looking up at an angle. So what happens is, judges want to see this fullness, this roundness, this development to the glute. But if they're looking up, if that upper glute is lacking, it's game over. Because now all of a sudden it looks flat. Your glutes just look totally flat from that perspective. They don't look full. They're not going to be there. If you have the development, you have that roundness, that fullness, all right, now you got it. And that's a good scoring for you, okay? This is one of the reasons I think, actually, that Maureen over here pulled off the win on Jen Dory. Her upper glute is a bit more depleted looking, not as developed as hers is, and I think that did make a difference. But it definitely will for you on stage competing at any level, anybody out there. So keeping the fullness to the glute, specifically focusing on the upper glute, and remembering that, the glute here, we want to see this fullness all the way through in bikini division. You got to see the roundness and the fullness to the glute overall, all around. and that comes from building. Okay, everybody's worried about ham ties in this division. Everybody's always worried about being lean enough. It's all about having the muscle if you want to have the shape. Let's talk for a second about that glute ham tie now, because it comes up. I know you're thinking it. Do you need the ham tie? You don't technically need the ham tie to do well in bikini division. The ham tie actually is an area that judges are scoring just to see kind of, is it tight? Are you holding extra body fat? You don't need to see this actual, ham tie zone, in most competitions. Now, this is Olympia. This is where athletes push it to the envelope, so you're going to see some glute ham tie. But again, this is a pretty soft glute ham tie compared to, like, if you look at how striated and cut glutes are in figure, women's physique, leaner divisions, more muscular, this is a softer look. This does not come, however, from just being conditioned. So it's not about just being lean to get a ham tie. I know that ladies are always chasing the ham tie by doing tons of cardio, trying to do stair stepper, trying to diet, trying to do all this and that. If you want a ham tie, ladies, and you want to bring it to stage, go for it. You're going to have the muscle development to do that. Now, the reason you can see a ham tie-in like this is because the glutes are so developed. The hamstrings are so developed. They're full, they're developed, they have, everything there muscle-wise. And then it meets stage condition. It pushes through, gives you this type of a look. So if you want that ham tie to be, and it's great. If you want the ham tie, get it, bring it to stage. You don't per se need it to be winning shows, to do well in bikini division. If it's an area that you like the look of and you want to bring through, it's going to come from that muscle development, all right? Now, hamstrings. Again, this is where we talked about basically just trying to meet symmetry, trying to meet proportion. Hamstrings are not a huge focus in this division. You'll see them here as far as they're being trained, they're developed, but they're not overdone, right? Because again, if you overdo the hamstrings, it's going to take away from the glutes. Not good for this division. So making sure you're training hamstrings, but you're not doing it in the sense of like, okay, I got to get these as big as I want. If you want that, go to wellness, okay? If you want a big, dominant lower body, go to wellness. If you want symmetry, shape, and proportions perfectly together, that's going to be bikini for you here. All right, and for just a second, you can see just a tad bit of the quads here coming through. This is just very little. I mean, you can't even see really on Maureen at all. The quads should not be to the point where we can really see them too much from the back. You can see the quads a lot from the back. You probably have too much development. Like if you look at a wellness competitor from the back, see that quad sweep all day long, okay? Bikini, you see very little of it. I just wanted to note that. And again, talking about the calves, you can see how if you overdo the calf training, it's not going to be good, okay? If you overdo the calf training, it's going to be too developed, throw your balance off, throw your symmetry off. No good. So conditioning-wise, same thing, soft level conditioning. Some soft lines, glute ham tie lines, okay? That's good, good. Some lines in the hamstrings, some separations here in the shoulders. Nothing else going on. Like if these athletes were super shredded, like I talk about all the time, you would see, tricep cuts. You'd see glute striations. You'd see all sorts of different cuts happening. This is a softer level of conditioning, all right? So really focus on, in bikini, getting the right amount of muscle before you want to go compete. And that's really what's going to take you to stage. Get that symmetry, get that proportion, get the hourglass effect that we're talking about all the time on this channel. And you're going to be doing really good no matter what level you go to stage at, okay? So if you guys like this video, you got something out of it, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I do have a free coaching trial. You want to try some workouts out. It's on my website, teamfflex.com. And make sure you follow me on Instagram, I want to say, because a lot of what we do on Instagram is way different than this channel. But if you like this type of content, there's stuff over there. And I want to hear what you want next. So drop it in the comments. Let me know what videos you want me to make next. And we're going to do that, all right? Thanks.